climate change. Our Honorable Chief Minister, in his visionary leadership, has placed paramount importance on the active involvement of our communities in the efficient management of our abundant natural resources. It is with immense pride that I share with you the steps Meghalaya has taken to combat climate changes. Meghalaya is the first state in India to launch an integrated water policy. In 2019, building on the foundation laid by the state water policy, the state introduced the Water Mission, a dynamic initiative aimed at the efficient management of Meghalaya's invaluable water resources. This mission heralds a collaborative approach, ensuring the sustainable utilization of water and creating livelihoods and entrepreneurships opportunity centered around the vital resource. Communities have emerged as champions of the conservation of catchment areas. A shining example of their unwavering commitment can be witnessed in the Mausanram Declaration, where 24 villages from the Mausanram blocks united to preserve critical catchment areas. These communities, through collective action, purchased privately owned lands and identified catchment areas, providing us with a powerful model of cohesion that other villages across the state can emulate. The state recognized a need for an efficient mechanism to manage and safeguard the sustainable management of the forest landscape through the forest management plans. In 22 alone, we created 400 FMPs, with an additional 500 currently in preparation this year. The Meghalaya Basin Development Authority, Forest Department, and the autonomous district councils are working harmoniously to translate the initial FMPs into operational schemes that will directly benefit the people of our state. A sustainable majority comprising of around 80% of Meghalaya's population is concentrated in rural areas, with approximately 70% dependent on agriculture and related activities for their sustenance. Recognizing the significance, the Meghalaya State Rural Livelihood Society launched the Natural Farming Initiative that encompasses 5 blocks engaging approximately 214 self-help groups, predominantly led by women of their communities, that has since expanded to 24 additional villages, benefiting around 3,030 farmers. Its primary objective is to ensure nutrition security by promoting multi-cropping and intercropping, enhancing farmers' profitability through reduced farming costs and minimizing the carbon footprints associated with farming practices. In 2022, the government of Meghalaya embarked on a pioneering journey with the launch of the Payment for Ecosystem Scheme, designed to incentivize communities to actively conserve our forests. In this first phase alone, the PECs have already encompassed over 17,000 plus hectares of forest land, demonstrating our steadfast commitment to achieving the ambitious target of 50,000 hectares over the next 5 years. Meghalaya Living Root Bridges, something which is famous and known worldwide, is an awe-inspiring testimony to the profound symbiotic relationship between humans and the environment. These extraordinary structures can be found in over 70 villages across our state and have garnered recognition by securing a place on UNESCO's tentative land list of World Heritage Sites. Moreover, the seed ball initiatives in Meghalaya has emerged as a cost-effective opportunity to enhance our green cover, engaging the enthusiastic participation of over 75 school children across the state. Recognizing the critical importance of effective natural resource management and a grassroots level, the government of Meghalaya, through the Community and Rural Development Department, has introduced amendments to the Mahatma Gandhi National Enrollment Guarantee Act 2005. This crucial management has facilitated the establishment of natural resource management committees within every village employment council across the state. Each committee has been entrusted with the responsibility of ensuring effective and sustainable management of our natural resources within their respective villages. The increased expenditure on natural resource management, reaching up to 45%, speaks volumes about the growing awareness and significance of water conservation and other NRM activities among other vibrant communities. Meghalaya's journey towards a sustainable future has been built on a foundation of cohesive collaboration, effective uniting all stakeholders with support of the Meghalaya State Council on Climate Change and Sustainable Development led by our Honorable Chief Minister. We have successfully implemented a diverse array of initiatives to conserve our environment and combat climate change. Guided by scientific principles, we strive to achieve a harmonious coexistence between our natural resources and sustainable development. Let us embrace these incredible possibilities that lie before us. Let us harness the resilience, cultural heritage, and spirit of our communities to address the profound impacts of climate change. Together, we can forge a path towards a brave new world, one that reimagines nature, economics, and environment-led growth. By coming together today, we understand that our economic development must be inextricably linked to the well-being of our ecosystems. It is through a nature-positive approach that we can unlock the immense potential of sustainable growth, enhance resilience, and a better future for generations to come. I am confident that through our deliberations, discussions, and shared commitment, we will forge new pathways, empower transformative actions, and lay the foundation for a future that embraces a brave new world, a world where nature, economics, and environment-led growth becomes our guiding principles. Thank you, welcome, Kublai, Jai Hind.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very insightful insight into how Meghalaya has been emerged as a lighthouse for what a nature-led economy looks like. And I think that provides us the perfect segue for our panel. I'd like to invite the panelists onto the stage. Mr. Tanveer Shakil Joy, the Honorable Member of Parliament from Bangladesh. Mr. Hisham Mondol, the Chief Advisor, Environmental Defense Fund, India. Ms. Iram Mirza, the former Strategy and Innovation Advisor, Ministry of Environment and Forest, the Government of Meghalaya, and founder, the Firstborn Collective, India. Mr. Rikesh Gurung, founder and Managing Director, the Green Road, Bhutan. And Ms. Dulanga Witharanage, the Climate Change Coordinator, Market Development Facility, Sri Lanka. And to moderate the session, we have my colleague, Mannat Jaspal, who's Associate Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Mannat.
Hello and welcome to you all. I'm very pleased to kickstart the first panel discussion for today. And we're very honored to have the Minister join us at the panel as well. So thank you for being here, Minister. So I'm going to dive straight in the interest of time. So since yesterday, we have been discussing plenty about nature and nature-based solutions and the promising role it can play to address the challenges of climate change and environmental degradation. And by harnessing the power of ecosystems, NBS can play a very important role in both adaptation and mitigation efforts and provide a series of ecosystem-based services. And at the same time, there is a growing consensus today that the current economic models of today are exploitative, they're extractive, and they fail to account for the value of nature. And perhaps by embracing new economic frameworks and new economic models, we can foster a more sustainable and inclusive development pathway that would encourage sustainable practices and at the same time incentivize investment in conservation and restoration of ecosystems. And a key aspect of that is mainstreaming NBS and internalizing the value of nature in economic systems. Now, how do we do that is something that I'd love to get all of your inputs in. And it is very critical at the same time that we incorporate local knowledge and indigenous wisdom and engage with communities in the decision-making processes. NBS can be very hyper-localized to address the key challenges around this and to really build community resilience. And I think bringing in the perspectives and voices of the Global South is critical in this discussion and narrative, naturally because the Global South is home to very rich biodiversity hotspots, but at the same time in the spirit of climate justice, it's very important to bring voices from the Global South. And I'm very glad that we have representation from about 4 Global South countries on this panel. And we have a series of experts here to shed light on the subject. At the same time, I think it's incredible and it's very befitting that we are having this conversation in the beautiful state of Meghalaya. So thank you so much for hosting us, Honorable Minister. And, a state that has very successfully demonstrated its commitment to promoting sustainable practices. It has engaged in initiatives to enhance carbon sinks, restore ecosystems, protect its very rich biodiversity, while at the same time enhancing livelihoods and protecting and ensuring the overall well-being of its citizens. The two objectives that are believed to be in conflict with one another but are not, and Meghalaya really proves to be putting out in a very exemplary example. And so I think I'll start with you, Honorable Minister. So pulling that string, how do you think, and you've given a very incredible, keynote about all the policies initiative that Meghalaya has been spearheading in this space and really pushing for nature-based solutions in the state. What are the success stories and how best do you think other states in the Northeast, but also in India and perhaps globally as well, can replicate and learn from Meghalaya? And what are the areas and scope of collaboration that you see in this regard? So over to you.
Like I said, the payment for ecosystem schemes, it's really working. We have, in previous years, also been very cautious about the maintenance of our forest covers. And that assignment was actually assigned only to the root department, which is the forest department. However, because land belongs predominantly to the people, there was a resistance, and we could not handle it. And the Honorable Chief Minister then embarked upon the payment for ecosystem scheme. Now, this is working very well, because now you are yourself empowering the public. And results of this will be evaluated in the next 3, 4, 5 years. But that definitely is a good place to start at. We have acute water distribution problems. There are some areas where they're platform-like, where when it rains throughout the rainy seasons, the water just gushes down to Bangladesh. We have no retention of this water. So what have we started? We've started the water scheme as well, where we thought that, let us see, Mausanram is the wettest village in the world, highest rainfall. Sora is similarly like that. But throughout the dry season, people have no water to drink, no potable water. So you empower the public and tell them to take over these catchment areas. In my own constituency, which is in the heart of the city, we still have critical potable water issues. So my communities in the Malki area have conserved their catchment areas with the help of the PHE department. These are some very basic requirements. And we have to ensure that whatever is done in the entire pattern of climate change, making sure that we protect the carbon fallouts, making sure that anything we do will not impact. You must have known that Meghalaya also is known for the rampant coal mining. Now again, we are now trying to work with farmers in Jaintia Hills, incentivizing farming practices with them, and making sure that there are alternative proposals given to sustain those citizens there, the communities there, who this far was so dependent on coal as a main livelihood. So we've started the Khasi Mandarin. So these are few initiatives that we are actually taking in the state on the ground. Now, what are we going to do about noise, air pollution? This is something, again, in a state like Meghalaya, or maybe in a country like India, where if you don't have an authority to supervise pollution control, nobody is involved on their own. We must start with schools and the education. Must ensure that all of these responsibilities are understood firstly by the public. Recently, there was an order by the DC of East Khasi Hills which said, no honking zones in these areas where there are hospitals, there are working places, there are high court areas. Nobody listens. So I think we need to start at schools also. That is why that seed ball project, we are involving young people, involving schools, involving the youth. Government cannot be made responsible alone for climate change and control of climate change. We are well aware of that. Thankful that we have a very able bureaucracy, able office of various departments that are on the job.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thank you for your very insightful comments. I'm going to move to you now, Iram, and I think before I do that, just quick house rules. I have one round of questions for the rest of you as well, and we will, and in case I have any follow-up, I'm going to ask in this round itself in the interest of time, and maybe we can stick to like a 5-minute intervention at max so that we can do a quick Q&A with our audience as well. So, Iram, we discussed this yesterday as well, how net zero is a misnomer for regions such as Meghalaya, which anyway have a negative emissions growth. How does Meghalaya see itself, or rather envision itself, to challenge and reshape such prevailing narratives surrounding green transitions, which are often very Occidental and Western-centric, and may not always apply to states such as Meghalaya, which have very unique environmental characteristics? So what will be the framework and model of such an environment state, perhaps, if I may say so?
So environment state actually came to us about 2 years ago as a sort of a post-COVID reckoning, where we kind of decided and looked at why we needed a different lens to look at the climate action and adaptation from a forest economy perspective. And for us, we needed a net zero equivalent. As you said, that we're already carbon neutral or carbon negative, right? So environment state, we developed within the state as a new development doctrine for the forest economies and ecological regions of the world. We're also looking at, think of it like an operating manual, right? It's a 5-body framework. First of it is called the Nature Asset Registry, right? To prove this point, we are mounting a prototype of what we call perhaps one of Asia's first biodiversity heat maps. We're using hyperspectral technology to map the forest not just for its carbon storage. I read a BCG report, by the way, that basically talked about the economic conception of the world's forest and pegged it at $150 trillion. That's just carbon storage. What we are going beyond is to actually look at and assess hyper-localized climate services that our nature, forest, is performing for the rest of the world, right? We are going beyond and creating our own indicators in terms of the ancient and the primeval biodiversity that we have, and creating new categories of ecosystem services and peg it and bring it into the official conception of nature. So that's Biodiversity Heatmap. Based on this foundational data that we will be gathering, which is again one of its very unique kind in the world, we will be evolving a concept called the nature banks, right? The idea of nature banks has to come from indigenous regions like Meghalaya and Northeast for the Western conception, because there has to be a return of nature, a return of investment on the nature, right? Banking with nature, our ecological assets, right? Once we have this data, we're looking at it as a tradable, monetizing commodity, but minus the extractive nature of it. Third point of it is a nature-based legislation. Based on developing a lot of these data and the banking nature concept, we're right now conceptualizing as we speak one of Asia's first climate emergency legislation. Again, a lot of these data points are going to go in creating new categories, new ways of bringing nature's right into legislative ambit. We're talking about biopatents, living root bridges that we all know of, and indigenous technology that has been claimed and touted as the futuristic green infrastructural technology is created by a native tribe. So the biopatent will give the rights of the usage of that technology for the world. Fourth, and a very important category, is the nature-based livelihood. Now, when we look at the indigenous or the forest economy like ours, and then we look at the green jobs, the Western conception of the green jobs is still very reductive, because we're looking at it as based in energy. As we said, net zero is a misnomer for us. We had to actually go back and invent green jobs, going back to our agricultural natural inventory and marry our line items to high premium value chains. So if you have pineapples, let's look at vegan leather. Let's look at alternate forest therapy zone models for ecotourism, right? And the last category, which ma'am also talked about, is public sensitization, right? As our Honorable Chief Minister was talking about in his inaugural address, we're actually dedicating our public urban spaces to mainstream the dialogue about climate conversation. So you will see, again, Asia's first climate change museum that is coming up, comes center. Also, just very last point that we talked about, and I know everyone's been talking about the payment of ecosystem services that the state has launched. Sampath sir here, who's the principal secretary, talked about how he has trained about 13,000 youth as conservation corp, right? Now think of this model as a basic idea of what we call a conservation basic income model, right? They are performing a climate service, right? And they need to be compensated for it, right? So this is what we've been quietly prototyping, and we want to take this development doctrine to the rest of the forest economies of the world.
Thank you, Iram. Thank you for highlighting the notion that there's no such thing as an invisible hand, and that states must play their part in spearheading these efforts in really redefining certain norms and institutional structures. And I think that brings me to you, Mr. Joy. I think Iram and the Honorable Minister have really highlighted, spoken a lot about the role of states, the role of regulations, the role of the governments to be able to really push for nature-based solutions. And Bangladesh is also indeed a home of several biodiversity hotspots. Sundarbans, for example, is one of the largest mangrove forests in the world. And similar to India, biodiversity hotspots in Bangladesh demonstrate the country's very rich natural heritage. And you know, we spoke, and you're also, for example, a member of the Climate Parliament in Bangladesh. And So I'm very keen to know from you as a parliamentarian, what is the role of government regulation in advancing nature-based solutions and services? And in the context of Bangladesh, can you perhaps highlight the importance of collaboration and cooperation with other countries to facilitate, better knowledge transfer, ideas exchange, sharing of best practices perhaps? So how can we really put forward a more collective action within the South-South region, but also globally, to push for more nature-based solutions and services?
Thank you, Mannat. Honorable Minister, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. As you correctly pointed out, that government is the key factor to tackle climate change and issue and nature-based solutions. And even in the recent global climate risk assessment, Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries. And our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was 2 times chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. I am happy to share with you that Bangladesh government has passed 2 years ago a very comprehensive plan, which we are calling Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. It is named after our founding father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And it encompasses everything, like from our NDC to our National Adaptation Plan, NAP, and we have another plan which is called Delta Plan 2100. That's like 100-year plan. And the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, that's like 10-year cycle from 2020 to 2030. So we are passing through the first 10-year cycle. And in the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we have highlighted nature-based solutions, and it's mixed with local-led adaptation, because local-led adaptation and nature-based solution goes hand in hand. And one of the key components of this Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, that we have community-based local-led adaptation model with hubs, like in villages, in small towns, where we are taking their indigenous knowledge, or we are sharing with them that how they had been tackling these climate change issues for hundreds of years, actually, because this is going on for hundreds of years. And we did not have this, global forum, we did not have this, international mechanism like even 20 years back, 30 years back. So what the people did then, they had to survive, and they actually survived. But the thing is, government needs to get involved, and our government is very proactive. Our Honorable Prime Minister already conferred like a Champion of the Earth, title by UN for 2 times. And I would like to mention that like the 4 components where we are doing NBS, there are like, we are promoting floating garden because Bangladesh is a riverine country. We have many rivers, many lakes and everything. So we are promoting floating gardens where we are using, local hyacinth to make a bed for vegetable growing and other kinds of, crops. And it's very popular in the midsection of Bangladesh. And as you rightly mentioned, that Bangladesh is housing one of the largest mangroves, Sundarban. And we have the longest sea beach, Cox's Bazar. So the coastal afforestation, it's been very top priority for us, because that Sundarban has been saving Bangladesh for like thousands of years from coastal, flooding and super cyclones and everything. And in Bangladesh, we have many areas where it is called Chor. It's a small island in the middle of the river, along with swamps and everything. There we are doing swamp forest restoration program. And we are in all of these things, and there is another one is forest protected area co-management. Okay, so these 4 components of NBS we are applying by NGOs. Government is the main initiators, and we are doing this. And in every section of this, we are actually collaborating with the people there, with the community there. And definitely, government is trying to build, make their capacity more so that they can apply their knowledges. Scientific research is very important, because definitely indigenous knowledge is there, but you need to update it. You cannot just apply those indigenous knowledge 100 years back or 200 years back. So that's very important. We are doing that. And if you want me to come to the second part of the question, right?
We're going to move because I think we're running out of time. Maybe we'll see if we have more time later. I'll come back to you if that's all right. Thank you so much, Mr. Joy, for really emphasizing the importance of cooperation and collaboration. And I think how Bangladesh is really developing more bottom-up approaches is certainly something we all can learn from, states around the world can learn from. And I think now moving from the government's role, let's move to the private sector's role, and I think I'd like to come to you, Rikesh. A lot of companies today are coming out with initiatives and commitments and goals centered around carbon neutrality and to achieving net zero. And there is a lot of work that's been done and strategies that have been devised around environment, social, and governance measures. For example, ESG now is expected to surpass, I think, about $41 trillion in assets in just 2022. Now, that's a massive number, right? And I'd like to now request you to put on your private sector cap on as the president of the Bhutan Association of Entrepreneurs and the founder and managing director of AB Ventures. In your opinion and experience, to what extent are nature-based solutions a part of the ESG story? And what can be done to mainstream and integrate such nature-based solutions and services in the financial and banking sector? So over to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. As an entrepreneur, I have a very different perspective. And then after listening to esteemed speakers yesterday and starting from the CM himself, let me start with a very a great quote that I often hear. A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit on. So with that, ESG is more than, I think, ticking box. I think it's about making difference. And the fascinating thing is that, in the last century, the business community were asking a very narrow overriding question of, how much financial value we can get. But I think the current, generation of entrepreneurs, change makers, lawyers, are asking a very different question. How much value can we get from this? What is the difference then that we can, give back to the community, to the society? So with that principle that Bhutan has, we follow the GNH philosophy, and environment is a very key pillar in whatever we do. I have a different definition of being an entrepreneur. My aspiration was not just to come up with a recycling unit or a manufacturing unit in town, but I was really dogmatic to the motivation of creating a very indigenous product and service to the whole society. So that has been a very strong principle that I have, and this, of course, comes from our great rulers, the kings, the majesties. So, if I take an example of my business, it took a long time for me to actually come up with new ideas, innovations in my country. And thanks to my mentor, Dr. Vasudevan, who's blessing of where I'm today now, and it's taken a long time actually for us to really move forward. And the first thing what you have to do is really educate, starting from the school-going children to the policymakers. And for me, being the first Bhutanese to start something new was a challenge for me. But for me, the thing was to get started. And now, the Green Road is part of the curriculum. We've been able to, encourage, our youth to start something very entrepreneurial. So we have, in fact, bought a curriculum in the school also now. So that is something very different that no other state or country has done that. So it's very encouraging. And I want to also share that, it's not the countries that creates economies. It's the entrepreneurs and small businesses that creates economy for the state, for the country, And when I talk about Bhutan, a small nation with just 750,000 people, especially the cottage and small industry sector who are into environment and, smaller businesses, they constitute almost, they employ about, 100,000 people out of the 350,000 employable population. So that's a huge contribution that, the entrepreneurs are playing in the country. And the key, factor is for anyone is just to get started, have dialogues with the government, talk about policies. But the first thing is you come up with actions and then you regulate later. So that is the approach that I've taken, especially in Bhutan. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have been able to replicate the same technology with Nepal. And I'm looking forward to also working with the government, Meghalaya, to really share the technology. And while I was driving from Guwahati to Shillong, I saw this very nice road and then saw the landscape. A lot of excavation was happening, a lot of soil erosion was happening. And then just about a year ago, and you must have heard about DENTAC, the border road organizations. They've been in Bhutan for the last 6 decades now. And they are the first company that built roads for us. And for the last 60 years, what they were doing was basically mitigating those landslide erosion with huge concrete structures, spending millions of rupees. But just recently, we have come up with a very simple technology of planting bamboos and vetiver grass. And that has worked wonder, actually. So something can also be done in Meghalaya. And then, see, it's all about, it's imperative that we should, look back at the past and then learn from it. And then it's also important that, it has to make economic sense. But at the same time, you have to have this societal, transformation. And I think we should really look back, recalibrate, and then see how we can move forward. So I'll keep that for now.
Thank you, Rikesh, and thank you for, I particularly appreciated your point and comment around how technological solutions don't have to be always so grandeur, they can be simple and localized and more naturalistic. So thank you for putting that out, and you've demonstrated that with examples in Bhutan itself. I think now I'll move on to Hisham. Hisham, as we delve into this intersection of finance and environment, it is only fitting that I turn to you next. And really talk about how best can we explore the role of pricing instruments to internalize externalities within economic systems. Over the past years, carbon markets have really gained significant prominence as a very effective policy toolkit, perhaps, within the fiscal space, and to be able to fight climate change and address the global warming challenges that we face today. But it's also really falling short in instances of integrity, transparency, and the local impact that it generates. And there are many lessons that we can learn from carbon, from the water credit market, for example, which can be perhaps applied to the nature market, which is still at a very incipient stage. So how can we, or rather, can we link carbon markets and the very incipient emerging nature markets to create a more comprehensive market for ecosystem services, which will enable a very holistic and integrated approach to addressing climate change and preserving ecosystems? And in light of this potential, what recommendations would you like to propose to the G20 to be able to harness this opportunity to unlock greater climate finance and, particularly for nature conservation and biodiversity restoration, while at the same time, of course, contributing to global climate objectives? So over to you, Hisham.
Sure, thanks, Manat. So a market works when you have a clear value, and this is where nature has a problem. Nature arguably provides the single biggest insurance for us as a species on this planet. No one knows what the value of that is. We know what the market cap of Apple is, we know what the GDP of individual countries are, but what is the value of the carbon sink? And that's kind of the starting point for what we need to do to expand nature markets. Fundamentally, the statistics that are out there suggest that we are undervaluing nature. There is a number which floats around which says the value of the nature economy is about $10 trillion. That's the revenue that you generate from commodities and agriculture. But what about the price that it should be charging for keeping us alive and well? That bit hasn't been done. So that's one part of it. Because that is not there, what's happening is that you're not resourcing nature as much as you should. And the challenge with nature is, to answer your question, can we do it? Yes, we can. It is complicated, it takes time, and it takes money. So we need to find ways of generating more monies around this. Now, if you look at nature markets in general, they fall into three types. From the mitigation side, there are carbon markets. From adaptation, there's insurance products. And from sustainability, there are financing bonds of various kinds. We hope that as we progress, the insurance market doesn't grow as much as it should. We hope that as business models evolve, green financing actually becomes profitable financing. But let's come to the carbon credit side of it. What's the good news? You know, Manat, as you said, it is gaining a lot of traction. Various projections that you read will tell you that by 2030, carbon markets will be 30, 40, 50, $100 billion, which sounds like a decent amount of money. Nature-based credits started at about 5% and now around 40%. The majority of it on agriculture, a little bit on biodiversity and on cook stoves and arrangements like that. That's the good news. The bad news is this money is nothing. It is completely a drop in the ocean in terms of what is the larger amount of funding that's concerned. The second thing is, you know, we work a lot on carbon markets, but we're the first to tell you that there are considerable concerns on carbon markets. The standards of carbon markets leaves a lot to be done. And, you know, there's efforts to try and improve the integrity of the standards. The transparency, how much does the buyer of the credit pay and how much is the supplier of the credit? And the supplier of the credit is the forest indigenous community on the ground or the farmer or the you know, the person who's putting up a biogas plant in his or her house. How much do they actually get? What is the value of the credits? And again, the value is one where there is a tendency to think that renewables or industrial credits are of more value than agricultural biodiversity credits. That's not a fault of the renewables credits, and we need renewables credits. It's a question of us not being able to price nature adequately. So coming to your last point in terms of tips or pointers, there would be three things.
Sorry, you'll just have maybe 1 minute because I'll have to move quickly to Dilgana.
One is put in place the building blocks to generate that value. The registry that Iram spoke about. Don't go immediately and buy the first credit that you get. Spend the time to build out the monitoring and reporting and verification frameworks because you'll get a higher value. The second is apply science to nature programming. You know, government after government, you hear these examples where there is 100,000 trees planted. A forest is not about trees. A forest is about biodiversity and indigenous communities and livelihoods. So apply science to it. And the third is to turbocharge the communications around your efforts so that people know that this is the dollar value of nature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hisham. I'm going to quickly move to you, Dulanga. I was going through your profile and I found that particularly very interesting. And, you know, it's really at the intersection of development and climate change, where you look at issues of poverty alleviation, but then also at climate resilience on the other hand. And often these two subjects are looked at in silos. In your opinion and in your area of work, in the pursuit of development objectives, how can we successfully align development with the climate objective and the agenda? How do we marry these two objectives to explore complementarities and co-benefits and not look at it from a perspective where you're cannibalizing each other's resources? So I think that's my first question to you, and I'll have a very quick follow-up for you as well. There is a lot of buzz around just transitions, for example, right? And it's also another term that we've adopted from the West. Doesn't always apply to the Global South context. It's often very limiting. Now, from a very people-positive social capital perspective, how can we ensure livelihoods, well-being, and the creation of jobs, green jobs, through nature-based solutions? And what specific kind of training, jobs, human resources, and social infrastructure do you think we need to support a workforce dedicated to nature conservation? So over to you.
Thanks, Manat. So I think something that we always need to understand is that you can't achieve development without addressing climate change, right? It's not a choice between one or the other. You can't achieve development without climate change addressing it. And starting off there, what we see is that most development projects, and in general, as a whole, the world is moving towards that right sense, where we are addressing climate change in order to achieve development. So that is happening. But I think in countries like Sri Lanka, where I come from, and I think this is quite relevant to here, Meghalaya as well, where we see that in terms of green jobs, like you mentioned, right, green jobs does not come in the way that we usually see it. We always think of green jobs as renewable energy related. We see, I think my panelists here also mentioned it, it's not always about energy efficiency. It's not always about making sure that it's about transport. For us, it's about green farmers. It's about green fishermen. I think that is the difference, right? And in Sri Lanka, most of the work that I do as well is about, for example, identifying communities that work with mangroves, for example, and then you create a sustainable tourism initiative, a curated program around these communities trying to offer this, what they're doing as their day-to-day activities, as actually something where now you can pay for it. You have tourists coming in, paying a premium in order to actually look at this work that they're doing. So you're creating green jobs, but not in the way that we're usually, you know, how we refer to a green job. So I think that's one thing. And coming to the second part of your question where you asked what are the social infrastructure measures that need to be in place, I think one thing is that we underestimate how important our natural capital is, and that's just not in Sri Lanka, but in, I think, the entire global south, for example, because these communities are born into this rich natural ecosystems. But what we don't see is that they don't understand how important it is in the current context, right? They don't understand the value of it in the current context. People talk about it, but those who are born into it don't really understand that. And I think that's where awareness comes into play. And we underestimate the importance of awareness. Most of the work that I do is about getting communities to understand, yes, you have natural capital, but this is how much it is actually worth out there in the world. So in getting that done, so awareness is one of the bigger things that we need to achieve. Second one is inclusion. We need to ensure that women and women's economic empowerment is actually addressed. This goes beyond access and actually touches upon agency as well. We need to look at finance. And we also, I think the next part of it is that we need to make sure that there are market linkages. We have communities that have great products, but we need to take it to markets. And that is where I think a lot of social infrastructure needs to take place, because market access is probably one of the bigger things that we require in the global south.
Thank you, Tulkana. I think we have time for maybe just like one question from the audience. So yeah, the gentleman on the table, the first table on the right, perhaps? Or where's the mics? And if I may request you, just let's aim for concise questions and not broader comments and statements. And if you like to direct your question to a particular panelist, please let us know. Can someone pass me a mic?
I can start.
I'm sorry, we'll take two questions then really quick, please.
Thanks, Chair. My question.
Can someone replace his mic, please?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
My question is to Ms. Dulanga, and here it's about development vis-a-vis climate change, as you were saying. And we know very much so that jobs.
Yeah. Could you just replace his mic?
Thank you. So we know very much so that fossil fuel jobs are the holder of the economy. In fact, fossil fuels in many of the global south is the baseline vis-a-vis the green or clean energy jobs and the jet between global south and the global north, how it's interpreted. I'm very much interested to hear the development vis-a-vis climate change that you were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to maybe go for your quick question?
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Tim Bosch from the German Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you, Cabinet Minister, for providing some insights into concrete work. It's very interesting to hear. My question is about how you see the potential to bring agriculture and forest protection together through an agroforestry approach, right? So where some kind of forest cover management is combined with agricultural productivity, because the gentleman from Bhutan also provided insights on natural erosion protection, for example, and the co-benefits as opposed to classical gray infrastructure projects. So I'm very curious to hear what's your assessment for the region, because I think there's been some pioneering work in other world regions. Curious to hear whether this is feasible here as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We've actually run out of time, but maybe we can take 30 seconds each for each of the questions. Honorable Minister, I'll start with you. On the,
we are very much seized with the importance of working together, collaborating together on a convergence mode, not just with one or two departments, but several departments. We are now trying our best to institute carbon-free agri-practices as well. Several of our cultivable land now is getting into the process of getting certified for organic production. Earlier, Meghalayans from time immemorial were actually practicing these, from before. Then the fertilizer era came. They were taught how to use fertilizers, and now we have to, again, debrief them and get back to organic practices, number one. Number two, we are engaging on ensuring that farming, which is we are an agrarian community from before, but over the years, these practices changed. So we have this coal problem in few areas in West Khasi Hills and in Jayanti Hills, trying to get the farmers to get back to their agriculture practices, trying to encourage them, trying to show them. And of course, we are also trying to ensure that our farmers are aware of the value of their green cover. These are few things we're doing, very difficult situations, big transitions, big commitment. Participation is important. Government can come up with a rule, but public will not follow it.
Thank you, Minister. Adul Khanna, maybe 30 seconds. Thank you.
Let me try. I'm happy to have a longer discussion if that helps later on.
In fact, just going to say that I'm sorry we can't take any more questions, but if I may speak on behalf of my panelists, please feel free to hound them after this session and get more in-person and responses.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I understand that there are lots of jobs along with coal, etc., that the Global South is actually currently engaging. But there is data to prove through the World Economic Forum's a study done this year, where they took 10 economies, some including the Global South, including India, where there are 11 million jobs, green jobs available. And that deficit of 11 million jobs comes in from the sectors of agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. So that's the gap that we need to address. So if we are transitioning from coal to other green jobs, there are jobs available. And I understand renewable plays a huge role in here. I'm not denying it. But what I'm saying is that that is not the only job out there. Most of the jobs come from other sectors as well.
Thank you so much for your brief response. So thank you so much, panelists, for being here. The Honorable Minister, we're very grateful and honored to have you with us. I think we'll step down now, but thank you very much. And thank you all for listening in.